We lived very close to a wetland down south, and we had a collie that had a talent for finding the messiest, most rancid filth in the swamp and bringing it home. Our yard, our porch, and from time to time, our house looked like it had been attacked by a large terrestrial slug, leaving a slime trail everywhere and on everything. I usually did not bother scolding her for her swamp-going habits, but one day, I came home to a bigger and uglier mess than usual. I couldn't even tell what she had gotten into, but it was beyond horrible. It was thick enough to be rubber cement, and it was foul as sewage. A wide trail of it went up to the porch, and to my horror, through an open window. I didn't know who left the window open, but I decided that they were in just as much trouble as the dog. Then, I had a moment of genuine double-take. Here came the dog, delighted to see me from behind me. She was completely clean. I grew fearful, wondering what had gotten inside the house through the window. I opened the front door, called out to my husband, to which I got no answer. It hurt to look at what happened inside the house. It was utterly ruined. That foul, rubbery slime was everywhere in the thick trails. I wondered if some kind of giant slug had gotten in. I stopped in my tracks when I saw the melted remains of a body on the sofa. The bones were intact, but the flesh and the innards looked to be liquefied, dissolved. I didn't need a team of forensics to tell me that it was my husband. I knew instantly. Vomiting, my vision going blurry, grief and nausea both crushing me at once. I called the police as soon as I could. They didn't take long to come and have a look around. They followed this slime trail to the house and out the back door, which had somehow been eaten through, though it looked like it had been eaten with something corrosive, like a strong acid. I was so beside myself with the shock and disgust that it's a wonder that I can even remember anything that happened. The investigators were just as baffled as I was. There was no way that I could have cooked up acid and dissolved my husband like that. Not in my kitchen. Not without access to some closely controlled chemicals that required very specific and delicate handling. I looked at the trail that led away from the house for a very long time. Something was out there that ate my husband, and I never knew what it was. I was powerless to help him. I moved away as soon as I could. The dog came with me. If you live next to a wetland or similar, don't you ever think you are completely safe, or that alligators are all that you have to ever worry about. I had chosen to take my mindfulness practice outdoors. Granted, there were more ways to get distracted in the great outdoors, but I was tired of the stale indoor environment. The facility I worked at was built close to a marsh, and as many people thought that the marsh was gross or creepy, I thought it to be relaxing. The oxygen that came out of such a place was rich with the purest of pure. They were full of life and green and noise. So, yeah, it would be distracting, but it would be a change of pace for my meditation routine. To my surprise, it wasn't that hard to achieve a state of meditation while listening to the sounds of the marsh. If anything, it made it easier. Somehow, it all blended together. I was counting my breaths in the usual technique when I got a funny feeling on the back of my neck. I can't really describe it, looking back, but it was something like a chill or a disturbance, like something just wasn't quite right. I opened my eyes, and I was still seated at the picnic table that was at the edge of the marsh. But, suspended over the water, were 3 wispy flames of green and blue. Swamp gas. I was seeing swamp gas. I had heard about marsh lights, but I never thought I'd ever live to see them. Some people don't even believe they exist. I was thrilled. But while I was smiling to myself, one flame of swamp gas floated from around behind me where the chill had been felt. My elation turned to a heavy, ominous feeling. Swamp gas is supposed to be just that. Combusting gas escaping the water. How was that puff of flame positioned behind me where there hadn't been any gas to combust, let alone any water? I stayed away from the water for a few days and came back, having finally shrugged off that creepy feeling that I had gotten. After another meditation session at the marsh's edge, I opened my eyes, and the lights were there again, only there were more of them. A few hovered over the water, while the rest of them flew around me in a circle. I was quite freaked out. I ran, swatting them out of my face when I had to pass through the ring around me. My actual home is far away from any marshes or wetlands, but I will wake up several times through the night, just in time to see a ray of blue or green light passing through my curtains, just before winking out. And I have no idea what to do now. I did have some people tell me that meditation came with certain risks, but I had no idea that this is what they might have had in mind. I'm a delivery driver, and I got a huge freezer truck that I take from warehouses to grocery stores all over the country. I get to see some funny things now and again. Most of them I just put down to trick of the eyes, but maybe I'm mighty tired. But the thing that lives out in the swamps around here, I've seen him like 3 or 4 times now. I know I ain't making him up. I only see him when I have my real late night or early morning shift. He must be shy during the day, or doesn't like it when it's too hot. Maybe. Can't say I blame him. He never comes close to the truck. Just seems to pop out of the water. Never really moves. Ain't never tried to rush at me in the truck or nothing. I don't feel any fear when I see him. And this last time, I raised my hand, gave him a quick salute. Why not? Doesn't cost anything to have good manners. The only thing that gets me is the smell. The swamps stink really bad anyway, but when old honey pops up, that smell gets about 10 times worse. Oh, I call him honey, on account of it being honey lake swamps around here. I'd say he'd be really tall if he came out of the water. Looks to me like he stands up, or maybe treading water. He's kind of got a face like a monkey, really hairy, dark in color, and sometimes bright yellow eyes. But the rest of his body, from what I can see, is kind of scaly. Old Honey kind of looks like a monkey crossed with an alligator, and he just pops up out of the water and watches me drive past in my truck. I've seen a whole lot of weird stuff in my time on the road, but ain't nothing quite as unusual as Old Honey. When you live somewhere like Georgia, you know you gotta be careful of the swamps. Not only should you always be careful around water anyway, but there are all sorts of creatures out there. Of course, I'm referring to snakes and gators, things that will bite you and hurt you. I didn't think that I'd ever be telling you about the time I saw a skunk ape. At least I think that's what it was, and can't think of a single other logical explanation, and boy, have I tried. I'm always careful if I go down there, and would never go into the actual swamps. Plus, they stink. Like rotting eggs or something. But I was there for a project I was doing at school, and I needed some photos. So I jumped in my mother's car and driven it out there just to take a few artistic shots. I just about finished up when the smell suddenly got a whole lot worse. Sometimes My dad goes fishing, and this was like when he left a whole load of fish guts in the garage, and we had a heat wave. Super gross. I'd gotten out of the car to take the pictures, and now with my hand over my mouth and nose, I was about to jump back in when I heard all this commotion from behind me. Some of the big vines in the swamp. It led out on the other side to a huge forest, and it sounded like something had come bounding into the swamp from over there and was just about to appear from behind the vegetation. I knew I should have gotten straight back in the car and driven off, but my curiosity was piqued. I just had to know what was out there. That's when I saw it. My best description of the thing would be this. It looked to be around my height, so maybe just a little over 5 feet. Very stocky, covered in reddish dark hair, except for around its eyes, which kind of looked like it had these 2 big bare patches of skin. It kind of looked like an ape, which is where I guess it gets its name, the skunk ape, from. The skunk part is totally accurate too, as this thing was the mustiest smell I've ever smelt. I just stood staring at it when it made a sudden movement and near scared the hell out of me. However, it wasn't directed at me. I saw it grab a snake out of the swamp water and just start munching into it. Then, it just started grabbing at the water and eating whatever it found. It was like a buffet out here for it. I must have stood and watched for about 5 minutes before I thought to myself, hey, I got a camera here. Why don't I take a shot? And don't you know it? As if it had read my mind, the very second I put the camera up to my face to try and get a decent focus, it disappeared. I guess these things remain a mystery for a reason. This one sure seemed camera shy. I've heard stories about them being really aggressive, but this one seemed just fine munching on whatever it could find out in the swamps.